What's up, everyone? Today I want to talk about employee mental health because I think it's an issue that a lot of people are uncomfortable bringing up as it relates to work. I was reading some articles online when I came across a statistic that said 1 out of 4 people admit to being depressed or have been depressed during this current kind of situation that's going on. And it made me reflect a little bit on how mental health affects people in general throughout their professional lives, even outside of what has been going on. So it's no real surprise to me that mental health concerns have been growing in the past few years, but I think this whole lockdown has just kind of exacerbated an issue that was already taking its toll on people, but for different reasons it just hasn't made it to the forefront. And I stumbled across another article that addresses the issue of people not wanting to talk about mental health with their supervisors. And I thought this would just be a good time to kind of share it because as people return to work, or maybe they're still up in the air about their work situations, this is something that isn't going to go away anytime soon. And we, as supervisors, need to be able to deal with it and provide support as best as we can. So this article is taken from Forbes, and it's written by Mark Murphy. I've left a link in the description below, so give it a read when you can. So the article is titled, "More than half of employees are afraid to discuss their mental health with their boss." So it starts out, it doesn't take a clinical psychologist to know that employees' mental health has declined precipitously during this pandemic. And even though I'm married to a clinical psychologist, the warning signs are apparent to virtually all lay people. Whether it's fatigue, loss of focus, anxiety, or guilt, the pandemic has taken a huge toll on our collective mental well-being, and there's an abundance of data to support that claim. Paycheck's recent study of more than 1,000 employees called Mental Health at Work during the virus discovered that not only has employee mental health suffered during the pandemic, but that employees are afraid to discuss those effects with their bosses. Out of 1,017 full-time employees who took the survey, more than half of the respondents, 54%, said they felt uncomfortable talking to their managers and supervisors about mental health. And even worse is that 30% of respondents fear that discussing their mental health could lead to being fired or furloughed, and 29% thought discussing their issues could cost them a promotion. Now, employees did share their concerns about declining mental health, just not with their bosses or HR. According to 35% of employees who discussed their mental health concerns, they discussed their issues with coworkers. Only 21% discussed mental health with a supervisor, and just 5% said they spoke with an HR representative. This should be troubling news for every leader. While it's great that lots of employees feel comfortable discussing their issues with their coworkers, it's disturbing that having a conversation with the boss is seen as so risky. So I want to stop there and just kind of talk a little bit about what was already said. So the first question is why is there this gap between people telling their coworkers things rather than their boss? Well, to me, it's kind of simple. A boss represents authority and a coworker represents similarity. You know, when you're having an issue in your private life, a lot of people choose to go to their friends over their parents. Why? Because their parents are in authority positions, and they don't want to feel judged or shamed by them. You know, second, a coworker is more likely to understand and empathize where you're coming from because they might be going through the same thing. Sure, your boss might have their own struggles with mental health, but they're in a different role than you are, and the perception is that they're not going to understand what you're going through. Number 3, when people are vulnerable, they think it's going to be held over their head. They think they think that when they tell their boss something, their boss is going to think that they can't hack it. And yeah, it's going to prevent that promotion. They also think that maybe the boss will just think they're looking for excuses. And another thing, it's kind of that concept of anything I say can and will be used against me. If I say I'm struggling, it's admission that I'm not doing a good job. So here's an example of that. I had a job that I was having a really tough time keeping up with. I actually went to my boss and flat out told her, I'm struggling. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job. And we chatted a bit, and she gave me some tips and encouragement. And, some time went on, and I made a mistake later on, and she brought up that conversation saying, we talked about this before, and it's happening again. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. I came to you for help, and that wasn't like a disciplinary conversation or even like a formal conversation. So why are you holding this against me? What do you think the odds are that I opened up to her ever again? If you're thinking 0, you're absolutely right. So if you want to be available to help your employees, don't be disingenuous. Warranted or not, people just don't trust HR. That's a whole nother separate topic that I could do a really long video on. But the reality is people feel like if they go to HR with an issue, it's gonna, and at the end of the day, it's just gonna end up in their permanent file. And you can't really go to HR and say something without the expectation that they're gonna go to your boss and talk to them about it, even if they say you're speaking in confidence. So again, all of these reasons aren't always true, but again, it's the perception. And that's the key. Truth doesn't matter, what's perceived is. So the article continues. Let's be honest for a moment. In the past few months, have you felt a bit more anxious about your career than you were 6 months ago? Have you felt a bit less productive than you were 6 months ago? Have you felt even a little bit more irritable than you were 6 months ago? Those are all warning signs of declining mental health. And if you haven't felt any of those, then you are truly unique, because virtually every worker has recently suffered at least a few of those symptoms. The question is whether your employees haven't felt a decline in their mental health. The Paycheck study is clear proof that lots of employees are suffering. The big question for leaders in HR departments is whether we're willing to hear those concerns and act appropriately, i.e., without punishing employees for raising their issues. The Paycheck's data also found that nearly half of employees reported worsening mental health, motivation, morale, productivity, and stress since the pandemic outbreak. So the big test for leaders is, do you want to hear those concerns? Have at least a third of your employees come to you to share those concerns about increased stress or decreased productivity? And if not, how are you going to get them to share their issues? We know from the Paycheck's data that remote employees have suffered a greater decrease in motivation than in-person employees. And we know from more than 20,000 people that have taken the quiz, is your personality suited to working remotely or in the office, that remote employees are more likely to say that being average in my work is truly a terrible thought for me. So, and stopping again, one thing supervisors need to keep in mind is how everyone is going to react to this kind of new normal, this new environment. In my department, the department had wanted us to do virtual activities to stay engaged with each other, but for myself and a few others, it just kind of seemed like forced fun, just another thing we had to do. So feeling obligated to do virtual lunches with people, even though even though it was stated as being optional, kind of puts those people in a bind. If I do it, I'm going to be annoyed, and I'm not going to really be as sort of productive or be able to contribute as much as I would like to. But if I don't do it, even though it's not mandatory, it's going to look like I'm not a team player and I'm not interested in being involved, which again isn't true. It's just, again, it's the idea of just another thing we have to do. So, when I did voice my concerns to the director and she completely understood and heard my concerns, it was just nice to be heard, and I didn't mind as much once I got her perspective on what she was trying to accomplish. So you need to be empathetic with people who normally seem motivated and aren't being their usual self. They could very well be engaged, just not able to show it in the way they normally do. Also, when you kind of have these sort of new ways, I guess you can say, of trying to connect with your team and, get people excited or trying to be there for people, understand that everybody is going to react to that differently. Again, people like me, we're thinking we already have to do these Zoom meetings, that are really obnoxious. It's already hard to get information from people and to people, and people aren't responding as quickly as they normally do. Now I just have to do something else that doesn't really fit the way I normally work. We're all in this weird boat. So, really, just at the most simple step, start by understanding that everybody needs an adjustment, and not everything is going to be just like you wouldn't expect somebody in the office. Some people are more than willing to come into your office and share with you things that are concerning to them. Other people are not. So it's going to be the same thing, just in a different setting because of how we're all working now. So keep that in mind as you're trying to break down these sort of walls that people have put up. So continuing on with the article, I want you to imagine that you're a high-achieving remote employee. This is not a stretch for most of the people reading this article. Now imagine that because of this issue going on, you're feeling stress levels that you haven't experienced before. Your kids are at home, you're afraid of catching a potentially fatal disease, you're feeling socially isolated, etc. In the background of all these stressful feelings, you got this idea that you need to deliver excellent work because being an average employee is just not good enough for you. You're experiencing exogenous stress, and at the same time, you're feeling some self-recrimination for not being your best self. This is a wildly complex array of emotions. And if you don't feel like you've got a smart, trusted advisor to guide you through the psychological tumult, you're likely to feel far worse than someone who's mindlessly punching the clock. So again, I ask every leader, are you hearing employees' deep concerns? Are they proactively sharing their expected declines in mental health? If they're not coming to you as their leader, they may be approaching their coworkers, but they may not. But they may also not be approaching anyone at all. And if you care about achieving your team's maximum productivity and performance, that should concern you greatly. Well, knowing that there is this mental health issue, I want to be clear that this is something that extends outside of this pandemic. So I think this whole situation, again, like I said before, has just amplified something that was already becoming a big concern. So employees' mental health seems to be something that has been going on for a while, and again, it isn't going away. So as a supervisor and leader, it's time to really start looking at employees' mental health with a much closer lens. So when I do career coaching for college students, most of them mention the most important thing for them is finding fulfillment and not being stressed out at work. Money actually is usually the third or even fourth thing that they mention. So people are really starting to take their mental health much more seriously on a personal level, even if businesses are not yet. So it's actually companies and organizations that are needing to do that are needing to catch up to the trends that employees are now that are now concerns to employees. So one thing my boss did when we were working from home was we had weekly one-on-one meetings scheduled virtually. But on some of those, we actually didn't even talk about work. We just chatted about how things were going, how she could better support me, if I had any questions or concerns regarding, returning to work, layoffs, etc. That was just that time to answer those. And every time she reassured me of the importance to take time for myself, to be okay to take breaks during the day, go for a walk, do errands that I needed to do. Because this wasn't a normal situation, she'd say, so I don't expect you to work as normal either. So if you need a day to, she'd also say, if you need a day to just recharge, go ahead and take it. And I think that was really important for me because, I was realizing that, when I was working in kind of spurts, like I'd work 2 to 3 hours really, really hard, and then I'd take like an hour and a half off and go do something else to get out of my apartment, go do errands, go for a walk. I found myself able to refocus so much more versus just sitting mindlessly at my desk and staring at my laptop when, I'm just distracted by 1.5 million other things. So keep that in mind. And as things become more and more hectic, employers need to start treating mental health the same way they treat someone who called in with an injury. If an employee who is struggling with a mental health issue is going to perform as bad or worse than if they had a physical illness. And while we tell people to stay home because of a physical illness, mostly due to it being contagious, a person who is struggling with a mental illness may not be physically contagious as if they're not going to pass on whatever germs they have to their coworkers, but it is going to have an impact on the people around them. It's just gonna affect the workplace in general. That person that just is just sad and is just kind of just feeling like down on themselves. That's gonna take a toll on people. Because people are going to be concerned with them, and then people might just be frustrated because that person just always seems like a downer, and then that person's going to feel worse because they know they're having a bad effect on the environment. So, we need to treat mental health similar to the way we treat physical health, and we need to use this opportunity to talk about mental health in general. Once this whole virus situation is over and people start returning to work, mental health, again, is still going to be an issue. It's not going to go away just because people can come back to work. If anything, it shined the spotlight on an issue. But again, as kids are going back to, or, are staying home, if, school districts decide not to open and parents are being told they have to come back to work, that's going to be another stressor. As people are struggling financially, that's going to be an issue, as jobs and hours and things like that, return and some get cut and people are having to kind of just adjust in general. Mental health is just going to become a bigger thing. So, the good news is now we can actually do something about it. When people come back to work, give them some time to adjust. Home situations, like I said, are still going to be hectic. And if you can cut people some slack, they'll be more than willing to help you out and cut you some slack too when you need it. I always tell people, work is just what we do when we provide for work is just what we do to provide for our families and provide a means for us to do what we really enjoy. Some people may find their job fulfilling, but at the end of the day, to most of the people, even if they enjoy their job, it's still just a job. It's still just a job. It's not worth your sanity and your health. And you got to allow people to be humans first. And again, I think that's why you're seeing the trend of more people putting mental health and work-life balance at the top of their list over things like promotions and money and prestige. So to wrap this video up, here are a few key reminders. So number one, mental health is just important as physical health. And number two, don't expect everyone to respond or react the same way. As a leader and a supervisor, you need to be willing to meet people halfway. And number three, if you're someone that is struggling with mental health or your employees are struggling with mental health concerns, remember at the end of the day, it's just a job. Treat your employees treat employees like humans, not robots. You can't expect people to just flip a switch and be 100% okay when they're back to normal. I never understand, or and I don't believe it when people say things like, I leave my work life at work and I leave my home life at home. It's not really realistic. We don't have switches where we can switch things on and off. So remember, not saying anything can have bigger repercussions. So if you're an employee and you are struggling with something, please go to your boss and talk to them. When I talked to my supervisor once about mental health issues, it actually bridged a big gap in the sense, like, it actually allowed us to have, it helped fill our trust bank, because it helped us get to an understanding about some things. So, and she was able to admit some things to me too, and about how mental health has affected her. So, be willing to be vulnerable, because that's going to open up doors and opportunities for you to build trust. So by taking the time to speak up, you are also going to give others the courage to talk about things and get the support that they need as well. So with that, I just want to end this video. And again, if you are struggling with mental health, please, by all means, talk to somebody. Don't keep it up inside. It's not going to do anything to help. And if you need somebody to talk to too, and you don't really know how to broach the conversation, please reach out to me. I'm more than willing to help you kind of work through how to develop that conversation and how to have the confidence to go into it. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. Again, check out that link in the description below. Take care, and we will see you soon.